Morning, everyone. Good afternoon for our friends in Europe. I'm very excited to reconnect with many of you since the last time I attended one of these meetings, which was, I think, maybe more than a year ago. So great to see you all. My name is Christophe Martel. For those that I haven't met, I'll give a brief background. I'm the CEO and co-founder of FOUNT. Previously founded TI People many years ago. After 15 years at CEB, the Corporate Executive Board, where I spent most of my years as a business leader, as head of EMEA based out of London, and then transitioned to Washington, DC to become CHRO. So this dual track of trying to manage businesses for many years and then trying to manage HR for a few years before the Gartner acquisition was what really shown me the importance of employee experience on both of its facets, from the business perspective, but also from an HR perspective. And the big question that's in front of us is, how do you manage that at scale in the relatively sizable and complex organizations that you all represent? So let me share a few thoughts, essentially, on what first of all, what problem we're trying to solve. And this is actually not really a commercial pitch deck. It's more trying to explain what problem are we trying to solve at FOUNT, and how do we go about solving it. And thinking through what is it that we're trying to make better. We're trying to make employees' experiences better. But what is it that employees experience? And the broadest statement that I could give is that what they're experiencing is work. Whether they call it doing work or being at work or thinking about work, it's actually all about work. By definition, if you're an employee, and when we talk about your experience as an employee, it is about understanding what is happening when you work. Now, which kind of brings the question of, what is work, right? And it's something that we all talk about all the time. But if you really think about it from an organization's perspective, the reason why organizations have workers is to try and create business value, essentially. And you increase the amount of value that's created through increasing worker productivity, their retention, and also the customer experience that you're creating. Now, what's in that big blue box? Like in the three, if you think of it as a salad bowl, like what are the three ingredients that you'd put in there? The first one is that you need a person. That's the worker. Right, so the person actually doing the stuff, and part of how workers define being at work is also the job they do, right? And so here you have a few examples of customer service rep or software developer and so on and so forth. So number one, the people, the worker. Number two, it's the things that they're trying to do, right? And so if you're going to get any work done, as you know, you actually have to do stuff. So these are essentially the activities that people do. And the third ingredient is essentially all the things and people that they interact with when they do what they're trying to do, right? And that includes things like, my supervisor or manager, scheduling system, Workday, ServiceNow, you name it, like all these things that, and actually the hundreds of things that an individual interacts with while at work. So that is really what, when we say we want to improve employees' experience at work, well, that's the game. Like, it's about us improving this stuff. Essentially, our perspective at FOUNT is that if you want to increase the amount of business value that comes out of this system, of course, you have to do work on the worker. And that is kind of what I would call the realm of HR, right? Like, this is how you increase people's skill level, how you pick better candidates to make sure that they're better fit for the job, et cetera, et cetera. But as experienced leaders, really the things we're focused on is number 2 and number 3. So the things that people do, how do we make that easier for them to do? And the things they interact with, how do we make it more effortless for them to, to negotiate all these hundreds of interactions they have as they do their work. So, digging into this this kind of question, well, how do you go about it? And many of you are familiar with this concept of moment, but one of the ways that we define it is, a moment is essentially something that people are trying to do. And what you're seeing in this on this page is a bit of a blend of things. To the left, things that are more about me as a worker consuming enterprise services, right? So, like, because the company is supposed to help me learn, it's supposed to help me find a new internal role if I want to change roles, help me change my benefits, etc. if I need to. So that is all about me having my life at work. And on the right side of the screen, what you're seeing is more things that I'm trying to do that have to do with doing my work, right? And so to be a good worker, I need to do a good job at, if I'm, in this case, a customer service rep, at resolving a customer complaint, escalating a customer situation, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of the landscape of stuff that people are trying to do, and this is just a sample. There's many of these activities that we all do day in, day out, and really the question is, how do we make that easier for the folks that are doing this? And that is introducing kind of the villain in the story, which is what gets in the way of doing, right? And essentially, and that is work friction. It's all those things that make work harder than it should be. And by the way, when I say make work harder than it should be, it includes the right side of this slide, so the day-to-day work activity, but also the left side, which is, I don't know, like me trying to change my benefits, and it takes me half an hour. It really shouldn't, and that is painful. Now, if you see this little piece of this snippet of research on the bottom here, you see why work friction damages employee experience and also productivity, right? And this is what people say they don't like about work friction, because it basically wastes people time, makes it harder for them to do a good job and to reach their objectives. It makes more work. It's disrespectful because it's really not paying attention to me, and so on and so forth. So you have here, and that is our objective at FOUNT, the ability to manage work friction would essentially go a long way in solving for better EX. Someone has a question. Did I? Yeah, Damon, that's you.
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. To get to the next level, we actually have to dig one click deeper. And because when people do things, they obviously interact with the world of stuff and people that are supposed to support their activities, right? And that is what we call touch points, and you'll see shortly examples of how this works. But essentially, the big question for an EX leader is.
Not a fan of anybody, I don't know.
Oh, would you mind muting yourself? I'm not sure who this was, but thank you. So when I try to resolve a customer complaint, if I'm a customer service agent, I'm going to interact with a pretty rich ecosystem, and the question is which one of these things is working for me. So in other words, it's supporting that activity, and which one of these things is letting me down. And as we all know from our day-to-day work, there's usually 1, 2, or 3 culprits, or a combination thereof, that is essentially making my job here or my activity more painful than it needs to be. And what's really interesting, if you think about this construct, is that the activity that individuals undertake, like resolving a customer complaint, these moments are a bit of a construct, right? You can't touch an activity, right? You can't really fix an activity. What you can try is to make it better, but the way you make it better is by intervening on these touch points, because these are things and constructs that you can actually impact. So this is an example of people, an individual at work interacting with their work environment. That kind of example carries out with moments that are not work moments, but much more me trying to grow at the company. In this case, pursuing a new internal role. And what you're seeing here is that depending on the moment, the touch point set changes. And the big question, as I mentioned earlier, is how do these touch points perform? Because if I could know how all these cross-functional things perform, I could actually go and fix them. And if I did, I would be able to improve the experience that people have when they do that particular activity. So we're kind of getting closer to the point here, which is if you're going to have an impact on people's experience, as an EX leader, you kind of have two ways. One is you take your backpack and you just go and improve experiences yourself, which is always a good thing to do, right? Any experience that's made better is going to be a plus for the organization and for employees. But the question is, how do you scale this? And what's in line of sight of us being able to have Touchpoint owners on the hook for improving the performance of the touch points they own is that as an EX leader, we actually can delegate the improvement of experiences to people that own these touch points and that are actually on the hook for delivering good products and services. So you have here an example of who are the owners for these various touch points. And what you see is that they're typically either business leaders, like typically that people that own, the kind of the work environment, HR leaders, whether it's HRBPs or centers of excellence, or IT teams, right? And when you blend all of these together, you now have a complete picture of the environment in which individuals operate. So let me pull up here and essentially go back to what we've just described. If we want to make work better, easier for people who do their work and improve their experience there, we have to manage through this very complex universe of moments and touch points in the organization. And the big question is, how do you scale this? Like, how do you project yourself as an EX leader with usually pretty limited resources to have an impact across this giant universe? So I want to ask the question, but actually before that, I'd like to ask Stephanie to kind of lean in, as she was a practitioner and an EX leader in an organization that, if I'm not mistaken, is about 800,000 people globally. So that's big enough. And that's lots of moments in Touchpoints. And how did you live this particular conundrum of being able to project yourself at scale in a large organization?
Thanks, Christophe. Yeah, I was reflecting recently on a pretty critical moment in my time as an EX professional, where as part of an EX team, what we did a lot of was deep research with employees in very specific parts of an experience, relying on human-centered design to improve that experience. But the reality was we were only ever affecting a very small portion of the universe. And I distinctly remember presenting this work to a very senior leader, and their reaction was, great, but how are we going to do this on a much broader scale? Mind you, we cannot increase the size of the employee experience team. So how? And I think what was very hard at the time was we understood the power of this deep skill set to go improve parts of the experience. And we knew that there were a whole set of other players that should have a hand in this, but didn't know how to turn this into a system where everyone is playing their rightful role. That was in 2017. I'd like to think I've achieved some good wisdom since and have the answers to these questions. But I think what we want to hear from the group is, what is hard for you guys about trying to influence as much of this universe as you can today. So ping in the chat, or please feel free to come off mute, tell us firsthand. Those are the best. So yeah, let us know what's hard about trying to do this today in your organization.
Yeah, so the first comment on the working on things from an end-to-end perspective is really a challenge. Absolutely true. I think part of our realization is that sometimes touchpoint owners can do individual work on their own individual touchpoint and still improve things, albeit marginally. If you want to do real end-to-end work that takes into account cross-functional dynamics, you definitely need to have a way to bring these cross-functional folks together into a problem-solving group. But you can't do that for everything, right? Because otherwise it becomes quickly unmanageable. How we are maximizing for collectively, how we measure it. So measurement is a key part of this, and you'll see in the second part of the presentation how we believe that data is actually the only way through. Because one thing that I think we've all experienced is that when you bring back super sharp conclusions from qualitative work or research work that you've done, or focus groups, it's often really hard to have senior leaders actually to take these considerations into account. Whereas hard data is a great way to punch through cross-functional complexity, essentially.
Yeah, that touches to a predominant theme here of silos and the difficulty
Yes.
of aligning people across them.
Very good. Where to focus effort? That's a big question. The question of prioritization and where to start. Lots of silos. Wow, there's just a this is a really big problem. Mindset level is shifting the OTP structure. Lack of alignment for executive roles. Yeah, so this is thank you so much for your input. I think these are all aspects of the problem that are all actually incredibly relevant, and you touched on it. You know, if I go back to this slide, just look at this. This doesn't look like much, right? Someone is pursuing an internal role. You know, one might say, well, it's really just an HR thing, but it turns out that you have touchpoint owners all over the map, right? You have a business that plays a huge role through managers and senior leaders. You have this HR COEs, and then you also have IT, right? That is the where a lot of these applications sit. So the siloed nature of the delivery of the experience is actually really hard to deal with. Good. So you know, for us, you know, but taking all this into account, we believe, and we've seen actually, for those of you who are familiar with Linda at Inca is a great example of that, that when you actually give touchpoint owners the data that they need so that they can make improvements to the things they own, whether it's an HR thing or an IT thing, or you know, it's a business workflow or whatever, you tend to see touchpoint owners actually taking action naturally. And that's a really interesting thing, is that you would think that you would have to force them to do things and to kind of manage them to do things. It turns out that most people in HR or IT or even in the business are trying to deliver, if possible, a good experience. It's just that they don't have the visibility into the experiences that they deliver, and therefore they can't make it better. So a lot of the objectives that we're trying to accomplish through the FOUNT platform, and you'll see that in a second, have to do with bringing the right data to the touchpoint owners that can do something about the touchpoints they own. So if you just pull up a minute and think about, assume that you are an HR IT professional, and in charge, and you're in charge of the job search portal in your organization. And think about the data they have. And again, this is just speaking to the visibility that they have on the experiences that they provide. Essentially, you get a bit of a hodgepodge of data coming your way. Typically, some echoes from engagement surveys that will tell you that people maybe feel that career mobility is not what it should be at the company, but how do you know that the job search portal is involved in this career mobility thing? Is it your thing that's breaking down, or is it someone else's thing? And if there's a doubt, usually people will choose the easiest, which is to say, well, that can't be me because my job search portal is great. You also get transaction surveys, right? So for example, if somebody applied for an internal role, you're going to get some data about what they thought of the the application, and it's kind of a weird question to ask, actually, like asking an NPS question about applying for a role. But in a way, it still doesn't speak directly to the resource that you own as a touchpoint owner. And then you get performance metrics that will tell you, again, at a slightly different level, how many users did you have, or how much time did they spend on the portal, if you have detailed analytics of that. But then how do you interpret that? Like how, if there's 500 employees a week that are using it, and it's less today than it was last week, what does that tell you about their experience? Not much, actually. So for us, we believe that owners essentially need data that helps them answer three things. within, and actually at the top level is, how is my Touchpoint performing? So this job search portal, is it doing the job it's supposed to do? So for whom? Because as you know, not everyone has the same experience with a given touchpoint. So you need to have visibility into different demographics. In what moment? Because the job search portal is going to be involved in several moments and is going to perform differently depending on the intent that the employee has when they're using the portal. And then finally, if it's not performing well, then what is it? Is it too complex, or is that there's not enough jobs available in it? And if we're able to provide that kind of data to this particular HR IT professional, you would actually find that most of them will try to optimize to improve their scores. So with that in mind, the three pathways that we've seen organizations or EX leaders take to actually drive the most impact, and the three pathways that I would say are kind of tested and proven are referenced here, and I'm going to show you in a second how FOUNT enables these two of these pathways, because we wouldn't have time to do all three. But the first one is actually having an impact on people's day-to-day work. And I know that that's an area that typically EX leaders tend to not venture into, right? So when we think about moments in touchpoints, most EX leaders tend to stay focused on more the enterprise services stuff, right? So HR ops and talent and so on and so forth. Well, if you really think about where the lion's share of experiences happen for a worker, it's actually as they do their work. And there's an amazing opportunity to drive both productivity and retention when you look at frontline teams. And we see quite a few companies essentially being very focused on that as an EX strategy. And the reason for that is that it drives business outcomes in a way that is very tangible for business leaders and for CEOs. So that is a really important pathway. We'll talk about it in a second. I'll show you a demo in a second on that. Number two is, in a way, a little bit of a similar approach, but with creating an effortless work environment. And that is typically with either HR ops or global services or shared services organizations, where you have these internal service providers that are trying to provide great, consumer grade services to employees, essentially. And that is also a pathway that tends to garner support internally, because it intuitively speaks to a productivity argument, right? So you're essentially removing complexity from the work environment for individuals. So for example, in onboarding, they can get their computer right away on day one, and then their computer, when it breaks down, they can get help quickly, and so on and so forth. That is a pathway where there's significant value creation. But it is a different set of owners. It's no longer with the business. It is now with HR ops or shared services, global business services, and such. And then the third one tends to be very connected to the very consistently painful issue of career mobility and growth that employees experience in most organizations. And that tends to come at the top of everyone's engagement surveys, saying, yeah, this is not really at the level I wish it were. and you essentially have talent organizations and L&D organizations that are mobilizing to try and tackle these issues by digging into, the underlying moments and touch points and fixing that at that root level. So I'm going to show you two examples of these pathways in a second. I just need to switch screens if you bear with me for a second. Let me see. Okay. So, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Good, thank you. All right. So, what we're actually gonna do is essentially look at an example of an organization that is essentially trying to improve the experience of a set of frontline workers, and in this case, call center agents. And by the way, you could actually do this for other types of roles like software developers or nurses and so on and so forth. But let's take this as an example. First things first is to define which are the activities. So in this case, the moments that need to be understood and where we need sharp data, right? And you see that these activities are a combination of work moments, like for example, resolving a complex caller issue, or handling or taking a break or whatever, but also more services moments like getting paid accurately, which for frontline workers is pretty important. So using this template, what you'll see there is essentially a set of moments where we can define through the platform the touch points that come into play to support these moments, right? So if you remember these, what happens within a moment is that there's a set of people and things supposed to support these things. What are they? And this is where this is set. Now, this gives you to a survey that is essentially shaped in this way of how is your overall experience of solving a complex caller issue, and underneath how is your experience of the various touch points that enable this particular activity, and with a couple of attributes that measure distinct aspects of this experience, and an open text box to understand any further comments from individuals. Now, as this is done, you essentially go and send this to the survey tool. Let's say in this case Qualtrics, and what you get back on the back end is essentially now a detailed look at two levels of data, and the first level is actually the moment level, right? So you kind of got data about how hard is it or how pleasant is it to do each one of these moments, or how well they work. You actually have a breakdown of how these moments perform by different demographics, right? So if you remember, what you want to know is not so much what experience performed well or not, but what experience performed well or not for whom. And essentially this key driver analysis that tells you on the x-axis how satisfied people are with each one of these moments, right? So whether it's having my first day or having career conversations or receiving pay, etc. And on the y-axis, how important it is for them as measured by correlation to their eNPS, so intent to stay or any other outcome variable. So this is essentially how you respond to the question of, well, how do I prioritize which moments need attention. Like in this case, having my first day is not really a priority because it scores pretty well. Resolving a complex color issue is actually a real problem. So the next level is now to, if you to jump, double click into these moments to see how touch points perform. And here, same thing. You have a heat map version of this where you essentially see by tenure, but you could do it by region or location, et cetera, how these specific touch points do to support this moment, which is I'm trying to resolve a complex customer issue. Is, for example, the AI assistant working and helping me do this? Like, so, and think about how important this is right now. Like in most of your organizations, you have frontline workers that are being given AI tools to improve their productivity, make their work easier. Big question is it really making their work easier? And in this case, it depends on their tenure. Like actually, if they're brand new at the company, it actually is making their work a lot harder. People that are 18 months over, it's actually doing a decent job, right? And so you essentially get a very clear performance grid for these touch points that can help understand what to go fix when it comes to this particular moment. Now, if you continue the analysis, you now look at this touch point, which is essentially the subject matter expert helpline, which is essentially an escalation line. And you see how it performs by moment, right? So you now have 2 moments in which it's involved, and it's clearly underperforming on both. So the next question is, well, what is it that's going on in there? And that's where text analysis is really important to go and get context about what is happening with the SME helpline in the context of this moment, right? So you see what you're seeing here is all the comments that in the resolving a complex color issue moment filtered by the term SME helpline to help understand what is really happening. Now, we talked about ownership earlier, and what I want to show you is how do you do that, right? And so think of this SME helpline as an example, this touch point that we've just looked at. Well, you can actually assign this touch point to somebody who owns it, because actually the SME helpline team has an owner who's actually the manager in charge of that helpline. So let's say this owner is Michael Stevens, and we've just assigned this particular touch point to him. And what you're seeing here is essentially what Michael Stevens sees, right? He sees that, just sees the data that pertains to his touch point. And he also sees how the 2 moments that his touch point is involved in are essentially performing, right? So what that allows him to do is to say, okay, I clearly have a problem with the way things are working right now. From a process perspective, there's something not working. Create a plan and essentially go make this work. And essentially what this individual, Michael Stevens, is now monitoring is the performance of his touch point over time, right? And the idea there is that he has a mini dashboard that is much simpler than the bigger one that you saw earlier, that just looks at the data for the stuff that he owns, and he's on the hook for making this better, which in this case, he actually managed to do. I'll break there and shift to a second demo that will show you a similar approach, but now for what I would call the pathway number 2, which is more going towards more HR type of things, right? Like this was clearly in the flow of work type of EX improvement. But just wanted to break here briefly to see if there's any questions you guys would have before we continue. Maybe try and find the.
There are a few questions in the chat, Christoph.
Aha. Ah. Okay, I will show what it looks on the other end to capture the data. Oh, it looks like Ian is helping to respond.
Yeah, I think Ian's responded to Jesse's question.
Okay, and then Mercedes prioritizing higher. Co-plan starting to design with us. Okay, good. Well, I have nothing more to say.
And maybe to Kareen's question, you know, what does it look like? What does the employee experience look like on the other end to capture this data? I know you showed that briefly in the window.
I will show you in the next one actually. So following now a similar. A similar storyline, but what we're looking at now is no longer work moments, but growth opportunities, right? So this is a company that's trying to figure out how to improve internal mobility. And here you'll see that the moments in scope are much more HR-owned moments, right? So pursuing an internal role, and my career, et cetera, et cetera. And to your point about, let's say pursuing an internal role, to your point about what does it look like for an employee, this is an example of the survey that they would receive, right? And essentially the survey is about understanding a specific moment and understanding their overall experience, asking a few qualifiers around, you know, the quality of that experience, and then finally the touch point scores in the context of that particular moment. So typically individuals, depending on constraints you have in terms of response rates and number of employees, et cetera, individuals may receive 1, 2, or 3 moments, but overall the time to respond, we try to keep below 5 minutes essentially, so that you know, it's not introducing friction on its own. Okay, so in this particular case, you know, oops, sorry, yep, export Qualtrics or. And by the way, to the question of I think how is this different from what we can do in with our survey tools? It is almost impossible in a commercially available survey tool like a Qualtrics or Medallia or others to build a logical model that depicts all those moments and these touch points and these journeys and these hundreds of them, because these things need to be managed. They can't just be a list of questions. When that's what they are, they become unmanageable. So for this particular example, what we talked about is how would you engage with, for example, head of talent in this case, right? Like a chief talent officer who is trying to understand what's really going on with our current mobility scores. Why is it not moving? And whenever we've done this type of work, you tend to get very strong traction within with talent leadership when you bring back this kind of data that says, well, there's a bunch of stuff on which we're doing a good job. And actually, you know, the way I would look at this key driver analysis here is to start with the good news with a talent leader that says, we're pretty good. Like feedback, people receiving promotions, transitioning to a new role, it's doing great. Even recognition is pretty good. However, when people are trying to find a new internal role, planning their career, or applying new skills, that's really not working. And what that helps the EX team do is essentially prioritize the work, right? And say, let's not try to like fix everything. Let's go focus on things that that are clearly getting in the way of employees and painful for them. And the added demographic layer on each one of these moments allows to have a really fine interpretation of these challenges. Again, looking at the moment now, what you'll see is the issues there are no longer what I would call business touch points. These are except of course my manager and senior leaders, because they're involved in career conversations, but most of them are essentially touch points that HR has an impact on, right? Like for example, in this case, internal job newsletter is an HR comms ownership. Right. So in this particular example, it's clear that the job newsletter that kind of goes around to say, here are all the jobs available, is creating an issue. Here are the two moments in which it appears. And by the way, if you looked at the other touch points, you would see, like, for example, the manager is appearing in a whole host of touch points, which is a whole host of moments. Of course, because managers are almost ubiquitous in an individual's work environment. And you can also see that a given touchpoint performs very differently depending on the moment in which it is involved, right? So this moment context matters a lot. But with this data, you're actually able to pull that apart. So staying on this internal job newsletter, you essentially have now the ability to go and do as we did earlier, with the subject matter expert helpline, that escalation helpline, to assign this particular tool to an individual and essentially have them look at the results of their look at the result of their work, right? So in other words, in this case, the internal job newsletter is really performing poorly. They can add a new plan to go tackle it, for example, whitelist it, and essentially see how this performs over time. So it's a very similar approach. But I think what we want to convey is that regardless of the pathway you choose, whether it's about having an impact on the day-to-day work of individuals that create business value for the company, or impacting their experience of career mobility in this case, you actually follow a very similar track, which is to help Touchpoint owners have data that tells them what to go fix and help measure the progress they make on these things. Okay. I'm going to stop here and try to go back to our presentation, if I may. There you go. Okay. So I think at this stage, just seeing a little bit how, what we mean by these different pathways for value creation, essentially, it would be great to hear from you guys, which of these pathways are you pursuing or would you want to pursue, knowing that depending on organizational structure for the company, or company priorities, or just organizational dynamics within it, you can choose either one or all of these pathways. Right? And we have companies that just go after all of it. Some go after pick the unfair fight, but the easiest one to go. But it would be great to hear from you where you would want to go. Business, engineering, productivity, HR, COEs, performance. Interesting. Number one. Yeah. Three out of three select the business track. With our experience with companies that are, or EX leaders that are on the hook to prove business impact, or on the hook to basically earn the right for more work, is that number one is the best and easiest way. And very good point on the digital workplace. There is something happening with number one, and in a way number two, which is business leaders, CEOs, chief digital officers, chief transformation officers, heads of digital transformation and the like, are all trying to make work easier. They're all trying to drive productivity in the enterprise. And in a way, their objective, and they do that usually by just buying a bunch of technologies and implementing them. And that's true for number two. It's true in HR with HR transformation type efforts. And there is a great synergy for an EX leader that knows how to create this kind of touchpoint data to be able to inform all these efforts that are already ongoing in an organization with very relevant data that actually supports these productivity improvement efforts. And so we would concur with this idea that one and a half is the path to go. We're almost at time. I just wanted to bring forth a few takeaways. First one is that yes, employee experience is about the people. Like we're all pretty clear about that. We all love, we all like on a mission to make it, make work better for employees. They deserve it. But actually, the people that we need to focus on are these folks that own the work ecosystem, these touchpoint owners. They're almost the ones that we need to serve with the right information so that they can go and in turn make the experience of workers better. And finding a way to meet them where they are, right? They may not actually understand the concept of experience. They may not understand what a moment is, and so on and so forth. And that's okay. As long as we give them the right data that they know what to do with, they'll actually contribute to the outcome. And some of the work that Linda actually did at Inca is the proof of it. Like that over time, there's great momentum that's created by engaging them in that way. Second, they don't need a big lecture on experience. All they need is the data that they need about the things that they own. Three, the day-to-day work is an amazing opportunity for EX leaders first of all, to be super relevant to business leaders and no longer kind of boxed in the HR world, but actually to accelerate business outcomes. And making work easier for frontline workers is a really big problem for companies. Like think how many zillions of dollars will be invested in AI just this year, with that aim of making it easier for frontline workers to do their work. Well, you have a role to play in helping people who do that know if it indeed is making things easier or making it harder. And then finally, for all, actually what Stephanie was talking about earlier on, yeah, you can have like super pointed impact on specific experiences with great, cross-functional design teams. But at the end of the day, you need a continuous stream of data to continuously improve experiences. Even if you go and make a big difference somewhere once, you need to sustain it over time. And that is true with almost all of this experience work. It is really a continuous improvement work that is not dissimilar to, Lean or Six Sigma type of discipline in terms of how it's a constantly going closed loop. And that is what FOUNT aims to enable for leaders like you. Okay, I'm at time. I'll stop now. It was great to have this time with you all. I hope this was helpful. Reach out to us on LinkedIn or anyone else, or to anyone else on this team with any questions. But really appreciate the time for today.